All right, thank you for joining us today. This is Bob Coppedge, CEO Grand Poobah of Simplex-IT. And what I wanted to do was to have a quick dialogue over, started with the three models, but really there's four models of IT support for small, medium organizations. And the idea is we're going to talk about how, from a very, very top level, it really needs to be decided by management, how do organizations want to provide their organizations for information technology IT support. And we're going to go through this real quick. Here's our NASCAR slide. Look at Simplex IT. Aren't they wonderful? And we have our Simplex IT, traditional managed service provider. We also have our co-managed IT service providing, our CoMITs. We also do the SQL DBA side, the Simplex PM for project management. And we're also introducing Simplex TM. TM stands for Train Me, which is going to have some very, very price-sensitive training, both product specific and customized, and we'll be talking about that in a webinar going on next month. So that's going on as well here, and we've got a very, very busy schedule this month and next month with a whole bunch of webinars. This is the January 16th. 24th, we have our Intro to Virtual Reality and Augmented Reality. That's actually here in Stowe. And then in February, we've got 3 seminars going on as well. Oddly enough, beats the odds, but the book is finally coming out, CEO Survival Guide to Information Technology, and actually this topic is a subject, is one of the chapters in this book. It will be released, right now the timing is for a week from Friday, January 26, 2018, and it's going to be available on Amazon, and about 220 pages, yada, yada, yada. So, enough of that. Now let's get to the actual topic. So, some assumptions we're making here is, first of all, that the organization is the 10 to 200 employee range, and there's reasons why that number can be higher or lower. Majority of the IT needs are more of a traditional nature. We'll get into that as we go through this. And status quo is in need of a change, and we'll talk about that as well moving forward. Now, one of the key things that I really want to go over here is that IT is not what it used to be. Information technology for organizations, small, medium organizations, for about 15 years or so was, I got workstations, I got servers, and that's pretty much it. And however we're doing that, however we take a look at information technology, it was essentially the management of all that those devices accomplish. And every time we added a piece, whether it be now we're going to do email, now we're going to add web traffic, now we're going to add different applications, now we're going to add different types of devices. As you can see here, the those of you who are not just on the phone, we've really increased. We've now got perimeter devices. We've got the whole Internet of Things. We've got voice, video systems, the whole VPN and the firewall, cybersecurity, all of the traffic that goes in, that companies and organizations have to keep in mind, all of the interactions that are happening between both the devices and between organizations, both stakeholders, customers, vendors, as well as extended opportunities to have employees at literally any spot on the world for connectivity. The complexity has risen. And it's risen in such a way that as best can, the goal of IT is to hide or mask that complexity underneath user-friendly and user-functional interfaces so that the user isn't encumbered by that complexity. That's tough to do, and that's tough to keep up on. So what do we require when we talk about IT requirements for an organization? Well, we want it to be proactive, meaning that it's a lot easier to prevent a problem than it is to solve the problem. We also want to monitor the critical components, and I can't stress enough, the monitoring for performance, not only does it tell us, again, proactively that something's going to happen, but it also gives us a baseline for where we do see inappropriate behavior for whatever reason, that we can see what the behavior should be like normally. Backups. I can't tell you how often we find when we talk to organizations, regardless of who's doing their IT support, probably about 20% or so of organizations we talk to, turns out their backups don't work or didn't work the way that they felt they should. Cybersecurity has to be a priority. And this is especially true when we talk to organizations, for smaller organizations, the SMB market, that has an internal IT department. That internal IT department, they have been worrying primarily on making sure the trains run on time. Well, they now have to make sure the trains are secure as well. IT doesn't lockstep with a business. If IT doesn't understand what the business does and what the requirements are for that business, that's a challenge. So the IT needs to be in lockstep with the business, and IT skills are appropriate to the task at hand. So are the skills of the IT, whoever the IT providers are the skills up to snuff? And this is a pet peeve of mine, business decisions need to be made by business folks. IT decisions made by IT folks. That doesn't mean that they have to be made regardless, without any communication between the parties. But IT people should not decide how frequent the backups are, because it's the business people who know what the penalty is to the business if data is lost because we only do backups once a day. How the backups get done, that's an IT decision. So regardless of what model we use, regardless of how we implement and maintain the support, those are the top. So we actually, teaser, haha, I said 3. There's actually 4 models of IT support. 1, we have a guy. We have this person, we have this vendor from an organizational standpoint who simply provides support when needed. That break-fix concept. That break-fix concept that is really, on the surface, it seems the cheapest, because we only pay that person when needed. We only pay the company when needed. They come in, they do the project, they come in and do the fix, whatever. The second is internal IT staff. That's where we have people who are paid, and at least a portion, for smaller organizations, to their full priority, and in some cases for larger organizations, maybe multiple people, their job is to manage and maintain the IT for that organization. Now, that IT staff may have vendors that are brought in for projects. They may have people who they bring in for specific skills, but they're brought in as on an as needed or on a specific product or service or expertise basis. The managed service provider, your classic MSP, those are the people. That's the third model. That's where there is no internal IT responsibility or person. All of the IT responsibility is basically subcontracted, outsourced, if you will, to that managed service provider. And the managed service provider then has usually it's a fixed monthly fee. They provide the services, they do all of the stuff. And then the fourth and the newest of them, and the one we're kind of seeing some traction on, is the CoMIT, what we call CoMITs, co-managed IT service provider. It's essentially a combination of number 2 and number 3, internal and managed service provider. We think there's a complexity to that, but we think for organizations that have that don't just have one, that more on the medium side, we think that's really some great opportunities there for companies to improve their IT support. There's really only 3. This IT vendor person, when we talk about the priorities, what do we require? The requirements for IT support: proactive. A break fix is not proactive. They monitor. Break fix doesn't monitor. They're not securing, they're not testing the backup. They only come when they're called. Cybersecurity is not a priority. No, the priority is when you call, they come and they do stuff. There's no lockstep with the business. If you look through all of these steps, that break fix mentality doesn't work here. It's alluring because it looks the cheapest. You're only paying somebody when you need it, but you're also getting the services when you truly know that you need the services, as opposed to when you really know, or excuse me, when you really do need the services. So, I also want to set a special comment about the one-person IT woes. There's a lot of organizations that will have the one employee or in some cases they have this one consultant person and that's it. And really, this sounds good, but there are challenges here. When you have one person, that one person is constantly battling. It is hard for them to keep, it's hard to remember to drain the swamp when you're up to your tuchus and alligators. And in the one-person shop, it is often a challenge for that person to really step away from the day-to-day operations. The second is they want to upgrade, but they don't have the skill set. So they may have the skill set to maintain the operations, but they don't have the skill set to take that operations up to that next level. Whether that next level be we're going to upgrade to the next operating system, the next OS for desktops or servers, or we're going to implement the next security levels, all that kind of fun stuff. And then the other thing we find is in several cases where this person really knows what the core business does. They really understand what the requirements are, and they maybe even have some tremendous skills in terms of writing reports or using the business databases and some of the BI tools, but they're busy rebuilding computers and adding new users and making sure the backups are running and all that kind of fun stuff. So you, as a company, you're really losing out on what this value this person really could bring and specialize in unique value because they're busy, washing out the stables. When that person goes on vacation, what happens? And then if that person goes on vacation forever, they leave and they go to another company, you start from scratch because a lot of cases one person shops, they don't document stuff as well as you'd like. They don't have the specializations. They don't have any specialized skills because they've been working on everything. There's nothing wrong with a jack of all trades. Specialization is for insects is one of my favorite sayings. And there's no time to even consider newer technologies, both from a business standpoint as well as from a technical standpoint. But let's talk about internal IT staff. And by this, I mean there could be one person, there could be many people. The benefits of that, control. The organization is paying these people directly. The organization is expecting them to put in 40, 50-hour work weeks. You have control as the business owner. You also get to prioritize. This is their people's livelihood. This is their jobs. You never have to worry, hopefully, whether or not the business is going to be a number one priority. Same thing with focus. And then the final one, which is true no matter how it plays, is understanding. These people will live, eat, and breathe your organization. They will live, eat, and breathe whatever your priorities, how you do things, which actually can be a double-edged sword. But the key thing is that they're going to actually see, eat, breathe, all of that, so they know when there's a problem on customer service side for the business that's a big impact and it has total. It actually has a huge priority. The risks, it stifles growth because that internal IT staff runs the risk of becoming basically dependent upon the status quo. There's nothing from the external side, the external world that's really telling them here's new skills, here's new opportunities, unless you make that a priority that they do keep up to date, which if you do, great. But most companies don't seem to do that. Now there is a lot of cases, especially in the one-man shop, that they're self-taught. Self-taught does not equate to best practice. And I know a lot of people who are completely 100% self-taught, and they're absolutely brilliant. They're fantastic. They're great. But they don't necessarily do things the way the industry has decided is the best practice. And usually best practice is best practice for a reason. Same thing for skill sets. Same thing for expertise. For the internal IT staff model, unless the business makes it a priority to keep everybody up to date and up to skill sets, and it doesn't happen. And often where a company has an IT department, the skill set is very, very focused on the status quo, on just what they have in the here and now. So, should you go with the internal IT staff? The should reasons are if you have unique IT requirements. If your product, the goods and services that you bring to bear to your customers and to your stakeholders are truly unique, then a third party is going to have trouble providing that service. So your employees will be great. So that's terrific. Same thing, control focus. If you have to make absolutely sure that your resources are available in the way that you want them to be, and you, again, control is the big thing, then the internal IT staff is good for you. Why shouldn't you? Because in reality, it's more expensive. Multiple studies have shown essentially that an internal IT department is more expensive than the external managed service provider. In some cases, the benefits are there, and there's reason to it, but in most cases, it's more expensive. And the second is you now have buyer-seller relationships with all of your other vendors, and we'll get into why that's a little different than the MSP side as well. Okay. The managed service provider, the MSP, and I want to be clear, Simplex-IT, we are an MSP, and probably about 2/3 of our clients fall under this model. So this is us. The benefits, cost. It's a lower cost than the on-premise if you compare apples to apples. The MSPs in a lot of cases may end up looking more expensive if you're not fulfilling that proactive, constantly monitored, constantly up to date, all that kind of fun stuff. If you're not including that, then the on-premise can sometimes look more compelling. But you're not comparing apples to apples. Bigger technical pool. So here at Simplex-IT, we're a mid-sized MSP, I would say. So we've got about 7 or 8 people who are on the technical side. So we have 7 or 8 people with differing value. We've got people who are experts on the SQL, on the database side. We've got people who are experts on the Active Directory. We've got people who are experts on the Office 365. We've got people so we can bring the resource to bear who still have the knowledge of your organization because we share it and all that kind of fun stuff. So we can be more efficient with our sharing of the technical pool. And strategic IT insight, we can come in and we can say, here's the trends that are happening on the business and in the industry, here's technology that's coming down the pipe, here's all of that kind of fun stuff, and because that's part of what we do. So the risk. Some MSPs are still stuck in the fancy break fix. So all they're doing is they throw some monitoring up front and they're still doing break fix, and all they're doing is really just fixing broken stuff and the like. Second is potentially long contracts. With an employee, with an internal IT department, somebody that you don't like it, you fire them. You replace them. With a managed service provider who signed you up with these wonderful promises and a 3-year-long contract, you got a 3-year-long contract. By the way, we don't do those. We do 30-day out. Either side can say, yeah, not working out. And skill and expertise. Just because somebody's an MSP does not necessarily mean they've got the skill and expertise. When I say 20% of the companies that we go to, it turns out they really don't have good backups. A good chunk of them I'm looking at have current MSPs who are providing the service, and they're just not effectively looking at the backups. As an example, should you or shouldn't you? Best practice, how we do things. Simplex-IT. We have best practices for adding employees. We have best practices for ramping up computers. We have best practices for applying cybersecurity. We have best practices for doing these things. So we do things consistently. It's a straight budget. Here's our monthly fee for the services that we give, and that includes the antivirus, the backups, all that kind of fun stuff. And then finally, strategic partner. If you're looking for someone who you can actually sit down when we do quarterly business reviews, where we sit down and we say, you tell us what you're looking to do for the business or what you're seeing your competitors do for your business over the next quarter, and let's talk about how we can work with technology, as well as here's what stuff is getting obsolete or out of date, here's the new stuff that's coming out, so on and so forth. So why shouldn't you? One, you have unique IT requirements. The more unique, it's a sliding scale, the more unique your IT requirements are, the more expensive it would be for an MSP, a traditional MSP, to actually provide the services necessary. So if you have completely unique, because of your product, you're doing a lot of really customized stuff in terms of web content that you're delivering to customer or whatever, then your MSPs, your traditional MSPs, are going to be more expensive to have that skill set in order to apply it directly. Second is you like buyer-seller relationships. You're not really ready for commitment. You just want somebody I want to hire you, bring you in, boom, done, go. and you want detailed control. Now, I want to stress, again, from our standpoint, when we deal with, from a managed service provider, we never deny control or access to our customers. We always give them, you have your credentials so you can go and you can, we'd rather you didn't let us manage your devices or your systems or your software, but we never hold passwords or credentials away. But as an MSP, we also want to have control or want to be the ones who are in charge of the products and of the services. So that's a traditional MSP model. Then we have the co-managed IT service, the CoMITs. Best of both worlds. That's where you have someone who has who is an actual employee on staff, who has some level of responsibility for IT for the organization, as well as a managed service provider working together. And the key words are working together. Something like that, what happens is we bring in our monitoring tools, our ticketing tools, our service deployment tool. We give access to the internal IT person to all of those and more. So that person can use the same tools that we do, take a look at the same pieces, parts, use the same documentation as we do, all of that. It's a partnership. But that person's only job is for the customer. So we get the best of both worlds. You get the internal person who understands the business, understands what they're doing, how they're going about doing it, and they're on site, so they can do the on-site focus where it matters. The risks on this has to be good communication. You can't just say, okay, you're working together and that's it. They have to be a team. And you can run into situations where there's finger pointing. If they don't have a team, well, I thought you were going to work on this. No, I thought you were going to work on it, so on and so forth. It can be potentially disjointed if there's, again, communication is the key thing. And then finally, there really aren't a lot of MSPs who are doing this. This is relatively, I would say, probably about 10% of MSPs. Ask me again next year, it'll probably be 20. It definitely is the wave of the future. Just like 4 or 5 years ago, we were one of the first people who were talking about hybrid, a combination of both on-premise and cloud in terms of IT resources. Now it's pretty much turning out that everybody is ultimately a hybrid organization, whether they do it or not. So should you or not? It's the most effective in terms of the strengths of that on-premise along with the strengths of the MSP when they're properly melded together. If IT is critical to your organization, if really the value of IT is significant, you recognize it and you're willing to invest in it. If you have some unique IT requirements, because then the person who's on site can be that person who's handling the unique IT requirements, and the managed service provider, the MSP, is handling all of the non-unique. Best of both worlds. You shouldn't, if you're forcing it. If you're basically saying, our current internal IT is really not that very good, but we don't want to get rid of them, so we're going to do this co-managed IT. You guys work it out. It's a recipe for disaster. And that's because both parties are not buying in. Especially if you bring in the MSP with the idea of, hey, we want you to work with our internal IT person. If that doesn't work out, then we'll fire him and we'll give you the whole job. Eek. So the MSP has more incentive to make that person fail, and the internal person has the same incentive to make the MSP fail, so he or she keeps their job, which gets back to either party is suspicious. This model works based on trust, and we actually take this to a further level with our companies or our customers, is we don't get into what is explicitly covered. We will talk generally what's covered with the understanding that is either company can cancel with a 30-day notice. So we will say something like, the on-site person is responsible for workstations and end users. Whereas we are responsible for the servers and the infrastructure. The customer's IT staff is responsible for all servers and applications and all that. We're responsible for the SQL Server side of things, and so on and so forth. But we will never say, no, we won't do that. We may say, okay, we'll do that for a particular task. What we will say is, okay, this seems to be a little bit outside of scope. But we'll do it, but then at the end of the month, let's talk about it so we make sure we're on the same page. And both parties have to be flexible on that. And it's worked out very, very well for us. I think it would be tougher to pin people down very specifically with 3-year-long contracts. So just as a side note. Um, so those are the three models. And I think it's one of those things where the this is one of those where the business management really needs to make the decision on which approach, which model is most effective and most efficient to them. Uh, and it's one where there's no right, there's no wrong, but there are some pluses and minuses. And hopefully this discussion has been a little bit useful on that. So, as always, Simplex IT, we like to be the cool guys in IT, and we would be happy to have a conversation with anyone within your organization about how you're currently providing IT support, and we'll also include a dark web report on your organization. But we'd be happy to help. So, give me an email if you're interested, bob@simplex-it.com, and that is pretty much our topic for today. I'm almost finishing on time. This is like really weird. So, terrific. Okay then.